Welcome back to my 7-part series on Nestor Makhno. This one is episode 4, named, perhaps appropriately, That Escalated Quickly, the year 1918. 1918 was a big year for Nestor Makhno and the anarcho-communists of Hulia-Polye. It started off with a bang. Makhno records that not even 8 days into the new year, a trainload of Cossacks was sent to put the anarcho-communists down from the Ukrainian government at the time. The Cossacks, as we've talked about before, have the sort of affect of orthodox biker gangs that are into democracy, pillaging, and not being told what to do. Nestor Makhno and actually a wonderfully underappreciated anarchist leader named Maria Nikiforova, think of her as the anarchist Joan of Arc, go to meet these Cossacks who are coming to invade Hulia-Polye. And after a brief, not as bloody as it could have been, battle, managed to capture the remaining Cossacks. The Cossacks make a wonderfully legalistic argument that they will surrender, but on the terms that their horses, their saddles, and their sabers be allowed to remain in their custody because these are cultural artifacts that are distinct to the Cossacks, and definitely also things you need to do your job well. And Maria Nikiforova and Makhno say, all right, I guess, sure, fine. And they bring them into Hulia-Polye and put them in the town square. What follows for the Cossacks must have been worse than death, which is to say, they are treated to several moralizing speeches from some of the anarchist intellectuals in Hulia-Polye. These speeches do not leave a great impression, or any impression, upon the Cossacks. They are reported as sort of smoking their very long hobbit-like pipes and laughing and sort of elbowing each other, while the anarchists talk themselves blue in the face. They continue doing this until Maria Nikiforova takes the stage. Maria Nikiforova was noted, even before this, as a particularly charismatic speaker. And she immediately proved why. Instead of trying to prove that A plus B equals C to the Cossacks, therefore A is for anarchism, B is for join us, C equals good idea, which does not work. Very abstract for the Cossacks, who are really not interested. Maria Nikiforova takes a more aggressive route, and she just lays into the Cossacks verbally, which is, you are the running dogs of the Russian Empire. You are slaves to the Tsar. Your proud spirit has been broken and bought. And if Christ was born today, not only would you nail him up to the cross yourselves, but you'd also put the spear in him to boot. And for the very orthodox presenting Cossacks, this is a hell of an accusation. And Makhno reports that some of them start crying spontaneously in response to Maria Nikiforova's excoriating speech. Maria Nikiforova concludes with, it's not our job to tell you what to do. You must do, of course, what you think is right, but we hope that you will join us and get the hell out if you won't. And this approach actually yields some dividends, because for the next few days, as the Cossacks are dispersing, some of them come to the Hulia-Polye anarcho-communist headquarters and give their mailing address. Like, wow, what you said there was very interesting to me. I would like to subscribe to your newsletter. Or they joined in person, or gave their name. It's a big deal back then. So the point of this story is not how badass is Maria Nikiforova, although of course she was a badass, but that the anarcho-communist philosophy was not a dead-end thing. It had fierce appeal for independent people like the Cossacks, like the Ukrainian peasants, and like Nestor Makhno. they had a hell of a recruiting pitch. Remember how we sort of panned out last episode to Moscow and our Van Dyked friend, Lenin? Well, big things are happening there because Lenin is desperate to get out of World War I. It is a constant drain on the empire's resources, the Russian Empire, basically, at this point, or coming to. And Lenin makes the expedient decision to sign a treaty with Imperial Germany. That treaty is the Treaty of Restletos. And why that matters is that it grants vast swaths of Russia's hinterland, the Russian imperial hinterland, like Finland, parts of Poland, and the Ukraine, to Germany. Basically, cutting off your fingers so you can pull your arm back. Or if we take the other metaphor we use, the throwing people to the wolves thing, he was willing to throw some territories off the sled just so he could finish the Russian Revolution, which is really more of a coup at this point. This is very, 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 very bad for Makhno. The reason it is very bad for Makhno is that it ensures that the Austro-Hungarians who now are in the Ukraine and around Huliapolye actually start paying attention to what Makhno is doing. They fund a independent Ukrainian government. Definitely not just a sock puppet for the Austro-Hungarian agenda, and start putting the screws to the anarcho-communists. They also, because remember, Austro-Hungarian, you could just say German, roots means that they have a lot in common with the landed aristocracy of the area, the Mennonites, who, as you recall, are German religious refugees sworn to a life of absolute pacifism. Well, the Austro-Hungarians said, you know what's great? If you wanted to stop these peasants demanding their rights, we could give you some guns, maybe some officers to train you. Just saying, do that for you. And some of the Mennonites think this is a really good idea. And take the guns, take the artillery, take the training, and use it to put down peasant uprisings. Or, in some cases, forcibly recruit peasants from other villages who have nothing to do with them to work on their land. Makhno does not care for this. Makhno has been, on a low level, expropriating land from the Mennonite landlords, which is where you come in with several of your armed friends, if you're Makhno, and divide up the land fairly between the people who work it and the people who at one point owned it. Say you're a Mennonite family of 6, and you have, say, maybe 30 laborers. Makhno would come in, take what was of value, but then say, all right, we're going to do some long division, kids. What's 300 acres divided by 36? No cheating. Well, that's how many acres each of you now has. Now we're going to split up the farm equipment. And go with God, and this doesn't need to be violent. I have no animosity to you, Mennonites, because you are not landlords anymore. You don't own people anymore, so I have no more beef with you. It was not always that civilized, because Makhno did not always have a firm hand on his troops, and there was a lot of blood spilled during these expropriations. But Makhno did remember who had helped him in his previous life as a young revolutionary. Remember the Jansens, the first people he ever worked for? He interfered personally on their behalf when the Makhnovites, as they were starting to call themselves, came to the farm and began, all right, we're going to expropriate the... You know, this looks awfully familiar. All right, guys, we're not expropriating this. These guys did me a very good turn when they did not have to. We're leaving. Let's go. Come on. Similar things were reported for the Neufelds, the Neufeld family, and the Gerhardts, both of which who had helped Makhno in the past. But there's a darker side to this expropriation. Makhno can't be everywhere at once. There's a famous incident where Makhno comes across a bunch of people harassing a man he knew glancingly, who asks for Makhno to interfere. These guys want to take my horse. I've already divided up my land. I've done everything you said, Batko Makhno. Batko, of course, being a title of little father or sort of war leader. I've done everything you've said. We go way back. Tell your goons to step off. And Makhno comes in, tells them, what the hell are you doing? This guy's done everything we've asked. Piss off. And they piss off while Makhno's looking. And then when he leaves, because he's a busy man, they just take the horse anyway. This is the problem with armies and with peasant militias. Anyway, Makhno does not really have an army yet exactly. He's fighting a guerrilla war against the Austro-Hungarian-backed Ukrainian government, which is a hell of a descriptor, and the Mennonite Selbstschutz, or self-defense forces. In fact, it looks like the brief career of Makhno might be even briefer, because when he is out doing these two sort of expropriations, he gets a pair of encoded telegrams from Huliapolye. And they say, in essence, don't come back. Whatever you do, don't come back. The Ukrainian national government has come in to Huliapolye and they've started crushing us. It's looking real bad here. Get out while you can. The Ukrainian national government, Germans functionally, not only take over Huliapolye, but execute one of Makhno's brothers and abuse his mother, which is a very poor life choice if you piss off Nestor Makhno. Makhno, having no choice, flees to Moscow, and in a true bit of luck, meets with Vladimir Lenin, who has consolidated his power and started jailing anarchists and anyone who is not a committed Bolshevik. This is going to be a trend that continues, by the way. So it kind of grinds Makhno's gears to have to ask for Bolshevik help, to be given reinforcements to go back to Huliapolye. But after a lot of back and forth and some very suspicious glances, Lenin says, okay, can do. Makhno, on another note, gets to meet his hero, our friend Peter Kropotkin, and the two of them have a nice back and forth for a couple of hours. Kropotkin admires Makhno's sort of pragmatic peasant, well, if it works, well, then we're going to do that, as opposed to the more abstract philosophical thing. And Makhno admires Kropotkin's articulation and the already legendary life he'd led, which I wish we could do a thing on Kropotkin, but never mind. He gets to meet his hero. It's a bright spot, right? Cool. And then he takes Bolshevik help and returns to Huliapolye. With Bolshevik reinforcements, he starts putting the screws on the Austro-Hungarians again. More guerrilla war, more expropriations, more problems. The fighting takes on a much more brutal character than in previous years. One of the historians who followed Makhno, Balash, talks about seeing a group of dogs picking at or surrounding a pile of decomposing human bodies, just sort of left in the middle of the steppe. And Balash wonders, and I quote, "Dogs, when brutalized, acquire the characteristics of wolves. And people, are we any different from wolves?" The beginning of the Russian Civil War is brutal. The entire Russian Civil War, which we're going to get into next episode, is brutal. And it will only become more complicated because Makhno is now a messianic figure to the anarcho-communists. Part of being a messianic, charismatic figure is that you tend to attract other people like you. One of these people is perhaps the most dangerous man to ever refuse to change out of a Russian sailor suit, Fedor Schuss. Fedor Schuss is also very similar to Makhno, swift to anger, violent, uncompromising in that way. But he starts to cut into Makhno's limelight. And that's a problem. Because if he does something that you don't like, if you're Makhno, who has this very strict revolutionary code of morals, don't shoot innocent civilians being one of them, Fedir Shus is not bound by that. There's a famous incident called the Silbertal Massacre, where Fedir Shus, under Makhno's orders, goes to the village of Silbertal, near where Makhno grew up, under Makhno's orders, expropriate these farms and bring back what they can spare to us, right? And Fedir Shus says, yeah, sure, okay, boss, whatever. But for the next 2 days, only brings back old pair of boots, claiming these are all they can spare. It doesn't take Makhno long to realize that Fedir Shus is just shooting the civilians of Silbertal. Makhno flies into a rage, confronts Shus and has him in prison, saying, I'll have you shot if you don't stop this. And Shus says, basically, I dare you. And Makhno grumbles, but he can't have him killed. If he has Fedir Shus executed publicly, as was the Makhnovist way, there's a very real chance that the people who follow and worship Shus would splinter off and create their own faction and make things infinitely worse for the anarcho-communists. And so Makhno has to grit his teeth and let Shus out of prison and not punish him. But they understandably have a bit of a tense relationship after that. Remember that time you did a war crime and I threatened to execute you? Good times. Bit of a strained friendship. That's one of the emerging problems that will come out, and we'll delve a bit more into next episode, is the problem of loyalty, changing of flags, and the tremendous civilian cost sustained in the Russian Civil War.